Providing that context there, we will of course bring you all of the continuing developments from Brussels ahead of that meeting later, looking at Ukrainian defence. We move on now though, and Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has strongly rejected a US proposal for a new nuclear agreement, calling it 100% against the national interests of the Islamic Republic. In a televised speech, Khamenei criticised the plan, which was delivered via Omani mediators, and said the United States had no right to dictate whether Iran should continue its uranium enrichment program or not. He called enrichment the key to Iran's nuclear program and said the proposal violates Iran's principles of self-reliance and the ideals of the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Let's listen in to what Iran's Supreme Leader has had to say.
اولین مطلبی که ما در باب هسته‌ای به طرف‌های آمریکایی و غیره میگیم اینه که شما چه کاره‌اید؟ چرا دخالت میکنید که ایران باید غنیسازی داشته باشه یا نداشته باشه؟ به شما چه؟ استقلال معناش اینه منتظر چراغ سبز آمریکا و امثال آمریکا نباشه، نگران چراغ قرمز آمریکا و امثال آمریکا نباشه.
Well, the proposal was presented last Saturday by President Donald Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. Reportedly, the interim plan would allow Iran to continue low-level enrichment while a longer-term deal is negotiated. 5 rounds of talks have remained inconclusive as major sticking points remain, especially Iran's refusal to halt nuclear enrichment. Reportedly, Iran is open to a US proposal involving a regional Iranian enrichment consortium, provided that it is located inside Iran. Meanwhile, earlier today, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian also echoed the same sentiment, reaffirming Tehran's hardline position, stating that Iran will not bow to US pressure to dismantle its nuclear program. Washington has so far insisted on zero enrichment and has threatened to increase pressure if a deal is not reached, reviving the maximum pressure campaign that began during Trump's first term. Iran, however, says that its nuclear activities are for peaceful purposes and denies that they are trying to build any nuclear weapon. Well, several developments there in the ongoing nuclear talks between Iran and the US. Joining us to discuss them is Professor Madhav Nalipat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, who is joining us from Trivandrum. Professor Nalipat, thank you as always for being here. Let's look at these comments from Iran's Supreme Leader, saying that the deal that the US has presented is not in its national interests. They have said they are willing to potentially compromise. Do you think those earlier comments are now outdated and Iran's precedent has been set?
Well, first of all, I'm not in Trivandrum. I'm very much in the national capital, Delhi. But I'd like to point out that, do you remember what happened to Muammar Gaddafi? Do you remember what happened to Saddam Hussein after they gave up their WMD? At that time, I said, after Gaddafi was so brutally killed, that North Korea will never surrender its nuclear assets, and Kim has clung on to them because he knows that's his only protection against an attack by the Western powers. He's not worried about South Korea, he's worried about the Western powers. Now, judging by their track record of basically persuading a country to give WMD, and then when it's perfectly safe, invade them. Iraq, do you think so many American troops would have gone into Iraq if there was really a feeling that Saddam Hussein had chemical or any other weapons? Of course not. The whole thing was a charade, as has now become clear now. This whole so-called searching for WMD that was not there. And what happened to Libya? Tony Blair was the best buddies of him. Frankly, a lot of stuff has happened between Blair and Gaddafi. I'm not going to talk about that. But suddenly Tony Blair, after he gave up his WMD, believed in Tony Blair, what happened to him? Have you seen the video of his final moments? And then after that, you see the video of Kim, the leader of North Korea, strutting around the place. Why? Because he's got nuclear assets. Do you think Iran is ever going to give up a nuclear weapon? after seeing the Gaddafi and the Saddam Hussein example, I mean, even a kindergarten student would be able to answer that question.
Well, Professor Nalipat, then, if that is what is happening, how do you think the US will respond? We know Donald Trump several times has threatened military action if a nuclear deal doesn't progress. Of course, sanctions ongoing as well. How do you think the US will and would respond if Iran can't agree to a nuclear deal? We're just waiting for Professor Madhav Nalipat to rejoin us, but as we do, just providing some context, of course, 5 indirect talks, 5 rounds of talks have taken place. This as the US have threatened military action, Donald Trump being very clear in his call for talks to progress and continue progressing, taking place in Oman, taking place in Rome as well. We wait to see, of course, if a breakthrough can be made, but current proposals have not yet been agreed to. We are once again joined by Professor Madhav Nalipat. Very quickly, Professor Nalipat, because we are running shorter on time, but how do we expect the US to respond if these talks don't progress?
Look, Trump tore up the first Iran deal, the Obama-Iran deal, as soon as he got his first term. Do you think he's going to make any concession to Iran the second term? I don't think so. If anything, he's going to harden his position, and he will join Bibi Netanyahu in that. Israel, I mean, quite naturally, because the existential nature of the threat it has from the IRGC and affiliates of the IRGC, that is Hamas and Hezbollah, is going all out after Iran's nuclear arsenal. I personally believe that these talks are going to fail, and after that, the best Iran can hope for is that the US does not directly join in a complete attack on Iran's nuclear assets by Netanyahu. But there's no doubt that Netanyahu, because Iran is an existential threat to the existence of Jewish people, forget about the state of Israel, the existence of Jewish people, you please read their propaganda tracts, please read their speeches. It's all about the Jewish people, and I mean, not just the state of Israel. So the reality is, frankly, I never expected these talks to go anywhere. If you check back, you'll find I've been skeptical from the start. I don't expect it to go anywhere. Iran will not want to give up its nuclear assets unless it's forced to by sheer, military force, because it has seen the experience of Gaddafi and Saddam, and is looking at the comfortable way in which Kim is doing. Why? Because he has nuclear assets. So he's never going to, Iran, I can tell you, is never going to give up his nuclear assets. And Khamenei was very forthright on that. And the Prime Minister, Khamenei is the Supreme Leader. I mean, the Prime Minister works under him, has got to parrot that. So frankly, if you're expecting any kind of a deal on the terms that President Trump wants, you're not going to get it. Any kind of a deal on the terms the Iranians want, you're not going to get it. I think, frankly, this is going nowhere. Thank you.
Professor Madhav Nalipat, thank you very much for providing your insights and opinions there.